I got called out by a commenter for the AV on my videos. I'll try to do a better job of getting decent sound on the voice, but I like to put out the sounds of the city. It's better at night. Yeah, my videos suck, but my channel has to be liked for its personality. It may never be pretty. I don't have the time, the patience, or the skill. When you go to your neighbor and talk to them, are they expected to dress like Liberace or something? I'm just a guy talking to you in the driveway. This is probably all this channel will ever be, unless somebody wants to co-op it, like on Wayne's World or some shit. Everything is like bloatware, and I'm gonna go on a short tirade about stuff that companies do. Like, there were websites back in the day that were very bare bones, and they were quite functional, but then they just start getting all these glossy graphics where it takes longer to find the links, and then the format of them would change randomly and often. It would be like if every time you went to the grocery store, they rearranged the aisles. Software companies seem to rearrange all the buttons, add a few features, and then they call that an update. There's usually some security stuff going on in the background too. That always has to change. But they need to quit throwing people back on the learning curve over and over again with these random changes. There are focus groups at software companies where they think very seriously about where the buttons go, and they do experiments with people to figure it out. That's one reason why they keep moving the buttons around. I was told this by someone in the software industry. If you look at any business, it wants to turn itself into an annuity if it can. It just wants to be a service, not a product. This one's been beaten to death, but the example I give is the heated seats on the luxury sedan. It's like you have to rent from a car that you own, paying for functionality that's delivered through the hardware you already own. I've seen the same thing on devices that interface with computers, like scanners. There's pieces of hardware, the utility of which can be more or less depending on what drivers are installed, and you have to pay additional for those drivers, but the hardware is identical. So you're paying to unlock features on hardware you already own, and they're seeking an ongoing percentage of wallet to do it. I've even encountered apps that I paid for, and they did what they did fine. They didn't need any changes. And then the software company came in and throttled back features, demanding a subscription to activate them. Although they probably had the right to do this reserved somewhere in the fine print of their user agreement. From my perspective, it's like I bought a piece of software that had functionality that was adequate, and then the party from whom I bought it took it away from me and then said they would rent it back to me. That's exactly what happened. I once bought a warranty on a computer, and a lightning strike burned out a part on it. When I went to exercise my warranty, I was told that the third party went out of business. I had to fight them to get the part, which they did eventually send, but I had to install it. The thing is if I did not try to exercise that warranty, I would have lived under the false impression that I was well covered when I wasn't. Anyway, that had very little to do with the quality of this channel, but I hope I'm telling you things that you might not already know or have thought, and that those ideas will help you in some way deal with reality. These ideas cannot be new, but they occur to me when contemplating our situation, so I'm going to articulate them. Human-created tragedies are historically a partial function of concentrations of power and/or exploited technological edges. There are many dead autocrats who have millions of deaths on their hands, and there are several innovations that were used as superweapons against unwary defenders. Innovations such as the stirrup and various applications of gunpowder. When I say these things, I base them on my reading of history. I'm not calling out specific people, but the types I describe are easy to find in the 20th century. The autocrat is a maximum concentration of power. Autocrats have zero redundancy, and they have to minimize risks. An autocrat has to always be wary, and many people become collateral damage in their pursuit of risk mitigation. Look at King Herod in the Bible. He sought to kill all males under a certain age due to a prophecy. When power is shared more equally in a society, the responsibility is spread around enough to promote more widespread buy-in. It seems in many places we have systems that leave large numbers of people in a malcontented state. I'm speaking as an American. The political system was designed with checks and balances, but the framers couldn't fully anticipate the changes that would come, and concentrations of power have sprung up around them, seeking to control them through corruption, buying the government one politician at a time. The buyers of politicians and the owners of things tend to be the same people, and so when you see the owners of things publicly denouncing certain politicians, you should ask yourself why. Is it possible that with the politicians they denounce, their money is no good? The checks and balances that remain in our government are like the beams that hold up the universe in Stephen King's Dark Tower universe, constantly being chipped away at. God help us all if we become a one-party state. If you can extrapolate anybody's moves out to see that they are trying to create a one-party state, that is not going anywhere good. A one-party state can quickly turn into a malicious homeowners association with an army trying to leverage law and technology to control every aspect of your life, to essentially treat you like livestock, to tag you and do with your body what they choose. That has been a reality already and is today. There are one-party totalitarian states. There are people who can do whatever they want with their citizens. No good will come with the destruction of checks and balances. We probably need more of them to shore up where powerful interests have done an end run around them. Any attempt to remove those checks and balances should at least be questioned, if not sanctioned. There should be consequences for passing unconstitutional laws. The puppets of oligarchs shouldn't get unlimited free rolls against the Bill of Rights. It articulates the source of our already inalienable and pre-existing rights. We've just created a body called the government to defend them. It does not have the right to revoke them from the people. Concentrations of power are kind of like this. When you were a little kid, maybe a bigger kid would grab you by the arms and start making you hate yourself with them. And then they would comment, "Stop hitting yourself." That's what it's like when the corrupt government has been purchased by moneyed interests. They buy all the politicians, and it looks like people are voting for things that go against their own interests. And people are supposed to be controlling the politicians, but they're not. The politicians serve those who bankrolled them. You don't even get on the ballot as a major candidate without sponsors of some kind. So money selects the candidates, and then money paints a picture of legitimacy through the media it owns. The people are like the toddler strapped into the car with a toy steering wheel. I'm not saying this to boast, but when you never give your senses over to television and movies, mass media, you start to see a different reality than the one that shapes the minds of TV watchers. People who grew up at a time when media was less concentrated or more trusting of it, and they've been with it all through their formative years. But they're not seeing it as it should be seen, as one long infomercial is what it is, really. It's a Potomkin village, the television world. It's like that show Friends. It was scrutinized for how unrealistic it was in terms of those people's lifestyle. Television moves very much like a fantasy. When I did watch television, I watched the show Dexter, and they would portray him like very unrealistic in terms of the things he could do all in a day. Like be a dad and a serial killer and a forensic pathologist and a husband. Like, it doesn't include commute times or washing the dishes, taking out the trash, washing clothes, making beds, changing sheets, changing cat litter, things that sponge up all your energy. So it glosses over things in the same way that a fantasy does. The cartoon character person that's the product of media conditioning has a fantasy world about the way things should be. There are certain little television tropes that have become the default point of view in such individuals because there's nothing more compelling that's come along to displace it. It's a point of view that on a topic that might not come up very often. But one of them will be that trope. There's a space for that, whatever trope, and the TV one is the one that got there first, and it just remains, and they can be discovered. So, someone says something like, only a coward carries a weapon or a gun. That's a TV trope. That's foolish. There's just places in the world where you could easily be the subject of violence. It would be foolish to not have some protection. It's things that get said in front of a studio audience and get the applause light. All those little positions are reflected in those types of situations. You can see just watching any talk show on TV, like what positions when articulated get the applause light. Those become like little positions that get conditioned into people. When your whole mind has been conditioned by television, there are a lot of mental positions that have been given like a byrun against any other idea. It basically supports identitarianism, and for multiple reasons. Like all these little ideas, they kind of enshrine the identity and the different facets of the identity. Like you should be heavily identified with, all sorts of superficial things. Being heavily identified with a lot of things that get attacked by the world causes a deeper unconsciousness that hides your natural state. Having that many identifiers necessitates a robust thought loop, and there's an opportunity cost to that. When you're not in your natural state, you're more easily manipulated and controlled, especially when the handles of identity can yield a predictable response in the face of media content, specific content. People who gossip and constantly talk bad about others, it's not a good quality to have. And when you look at how the media selectively maligns people in groups, you realize they're like that kind of a person. You don't want to hang around them because they always talk bad about everybody. The self-professed walk-in Abraham Hicks said that watching television was like spray painting your third eye. You'll always be missing a lot if you have a constant mental loop going on. It's like there's a percentage of attention constantly given to this fantasy world. And as we get older and accumulate more memories, that fantasy world becomes even more immersive. It takes up more attention. Less real moment is being experienced, and more share of attention is given to looping thoughts. I've known people for a long time and noticed that at a certain point they just did nothing but recounted experience and regurgitate the same point of view over and over again. It's like to talk to them was to be exposed to the externalized version of their thought loop. It's like that conversation was constantly going on, and when you sit down, they open their mouth and just expose it to you. And you can see it's the same old thought loop. It's the same words over and over again. People don't start off that way. They become more that way as that thought loop gets ingrained, those mental neural pathways. When it comes to media, it must be understood that the yielding of the senses is equivalent to the granting of consent. You grant consent to be exposed to content that shapes your mind and does it unconsciously in any way that the operator or the medium chooses. Your brain is put into an alpha state, and then you're fed information like an experience. It shapes your mind. It defines who you are, and you don't even get a choice of the matter. It's automatically accepted, and unless it's challenged or there's some stronger idea that's already there when the television idea is presented, then it just gets in there. People are clearly conditioned, and unconsciously so, and unconscious to it. Experiences get personalized. You just become an expression of somebody else's will. And it's not just that having a television-shaped mind is problematic, it is, but really having any identification with a thought loop, or it's like a progressive thing, and the bandwidth of attention given to content becomes greater and greater with age.